And behold, two men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah. This is representing the law of God and the prophets, many believe, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure. The Greek word there is exodus, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Jesus here is talking with Moses and Elijah about his exodus. This is why we did a little bit of history and to remind what happened in the Exodus. This is the literal translation of the Greek. It's not just they're talking to Jesus about, man, this is cool what you're going to go do. You're going to go to the cross and then you're going to be resurrected and that's great. And then you're going to ascend to heaven and you're going to exit this earth. I think it's something deeper than that. I think it's something deeper than they're just saying, man, this is really cool. It is great. It is cool. I think what they're talking about, Moses and Elijah and Jesus aren't sitting around talking about, man, whose exodus is going to be greater? You're going to ascend to heaven in front of all of these people. Like, but I led God's people out of Egypt. Which one is cooler? I think they're sitting around and talking about how Moses is saying, Jesus, how beautiful is this? You're about to fulfill what God used me to do to lead these people. How God led his people out of slavery in Egypt. You're about to lead God's people out of slavery to sin. I think they're sitting around and they're talking on this mountain about how Jesus, you are the fulfillment of the law. And you are the fulfillment of the prophets. Everything was pointing to you, Jesus, and now you're here. This is happening. We're talking about your exodus, the true and better exodus that isn't leading people away from a land of slavery, but is leading people away from slavery to sin, not to a physical promised land, but to an eternal, physical, perfect promised land, face to face with Jesus forever. Jesus is leading us on the true and better exodus. I say all of the time to you guys, we're all about Jesus. I think a lot of us hear that and it's like, okay, well, of course, aren't most churches? It's like, well, yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that we got to try to wrap our minds around that everything is about Jesus. In Luke 24, on the walk to Emmaus, Jesus is talking to some of his disciples. They don't recognize him, but he started telling them how everything in the law and the prophets was concerning him. How he is the fulfillment of all of it. How all of it was just a foreshadow of him. You can read through the book of Hebrews, the whole thing, and it just talks about all of these things in the Old Testament. Jesus is the true high priest. Jesus is the lamb that was slain for us. All of these things, how it's all about Jesus. The Bible is all about Jesus. I want to encourage you to read the Bible from the front to the back. The Old Testament is great to read. We learn a lot of things about who God is, but if you don't understand the gospel, if you don't understand the New Testament and you go reading it, the Old Testament, you can easily convert it into a list of do's and don'ts and a list of, if I do these things, then God's pleased with me. But when you understand the depths of the gospel and you read through it all the time, your mind's going to be blown. It's like, well, Paul talks about that, how Jesus is the fulfillment of that. Peter talks about that. The writer of Hebrews talks about that. And it's going to keep going. Every time it talks about the righteous and all this stuff, you're going to go, I know that I'm righteous because Jesus made me righteous. Not because I became good enough or I worked hard enough, but Jesus gave his righteousness to me. You start seeing why the psalmist just rejoices that the righteous are joyful because we have been made righteous. The whole Bible, it's not a trick. It's not something I'm trying to say okay, just the whole Bible's about Jesus. Just focus on Jesus. It's true. Jesus is the true and better Moses. Jesus is leading us on the true and better Exodus, and he's talking about it right here with Moses and Elijah. The Bible is not namely about the Christian. Everyone look at me. The Bible's not namely about you. It's not about the Christian. The Bible is about the Christ. Period. It's about Jesus. And the more it's about Jesus, the more joyful it's going to be for you. The better it's going to be for you. When you stop reading the Bible like it's all about you, but you start reading it like it's about Jesus, how it's written, your mind will start to be blown more and more and more every day. The Bible's not a collection of stories that we can use to try and make people moral. It's most of all a story about how we could never do it, and Jesus did to redeem us, to redeem his people.